Hey everybody. This video is going to go over the first sample essay for essay number 2, which was Harry Potter and the Sorcerer's Stone by Roger Ebert. Um, I want to just say this real quick before I get into discussing the essay, that this was written by Roger Ebert. So he's a professional movie critic. This is not an essay for a composition course, nor is it meant to be an evaluation essay. It's a movie review by a professional movie critic. So he doesn't necessarily give us the traditional elements that a composition essay would require. He doesn't have like a full on traditional thesis statement in his introduction, but he does go through the movie and give specific examples to back up, his opinion of the film. But I just want you to keep that in mind. This one is written by a professional, so it's not necessarily exactly the kind of essay that I'm asking you to write. Also, just while we're talking about it, when we read the sample essays for essay number 1, we read 6 in total. 5 of them were written by professional writers. The 6th one, Deep Green Eyes, was the only student sample we looked at. You guys love that one, by the way. I love that. For this essay, however, we're reading 6 sample essays again, but only the first one, this one on Harry Potter, is written by a professional writer. The other 5 are all student samples, so a little bit of a different perspective with this batch of essays. But having said that, just keep in mind that this is not a composition essay. But one thing that he does do in the beginning, Ebert, is he does let us know right away that if it's a good or a bad review. So remember, you have to do that in the introduction for essay number 2. You got to make sure your reader knows, is this a good review or a bad review? And Ebert can't say enough good things about this film, so we know pretty quickly that he's giving it a positive review. We don't necessarily know exactly what his criteria are yet, because like I said, he doesn't necessarily give us a traditional thesis statement. But as we go through the essay, we can kind of figure out what his criteria are. We could probably write a thesis statement, come up with a thesis statement for this essay, because he is very clear in the body of the piece. So he has his introduction. It's pretty clear it's a good review. The second paragraph is just a little transitional paragraph that gets us into the body of the essay. The first main point that he talks about, he gives us a little background information on the movie in case nobody's familiar, in case you're not familiar with the story, but very little information, just enough so we have a basic understanding of what's happening. And then he gets into the special effects, but really more about how the movie kind of goes along with the book, right? It's a book about magic and the world of magic. And so it stays pretty true to the novel in terms of how you would picture a magic school looking. It doesn't try to be too realistic, right? And he thinks that that's a good thing. So he gives us some specific examples of different set pieces from the film that, of course they look kind of made up. It's a world of magic. It's a magic school, right? It's a wizarding school. So so he talks about that, and I think that's one of his main points, is that it stays pretty true to how you imagine everything would look. The next part that he gets into are the actors, right? So that's clearly his second criteria. He gives some specific examples of especially the adult actors and a couple of the things that make them so good in this film. So definitely criteria number 2. And then he gets into more of the special effects in terms of the action in the movie. He talks about, how the game of Quidditch looks in the movie. The pit of tendrils, the room with the flying keys, the chess game with the life-size pieces. So clearly that was one of his criteria as well. So he makes it pretty clear that it's a good review. He has very specific elements of the movie that he discusses and gives examples of why he thinks it is such a good movie. And then, he ends with this idea of how Harry Potter isn't just, a film for kids, that it's actually it's going to go down as a classic. So he kind of leaves us with, something to think about in the conclusion. What I really want to point out with this, because so many students at first really want to do a movie review. And what I want you to think about after having read this movie review, do you know anything about the plot of this movie just by reading this essay? You don't, do you? He doesn't even mention Voldemort, the bad guy, which is like what half the story hinges on, right? If Harry Potter is the main character, I mean, you'd be hard pressed to say that Voldemort isn't right there with him. He doesn't have much screen time, but his presence is so important in the entire series, right? We don't know anything. I mean, we know that Harry lived with his aunt and uncle, and we know that he gets summoned to Hogwarts, and we know he makes these friends, and we know that clearly some crazy stuff goes on, but we don't know anything about the storyline. He doesn't talk about, it's not like he's saying Harry Potter and the Sorcerer's Stone is a great movie because, and then just gives us plot summary. No, you still don't really know exactly what this movie is about if you haven't seen it yet. So that is something that you need to keep in mind when you do a movie review. If you choose to do one for essay number 2, you are not telling us what the movie is about. You are picking specific elements from the movie that make it good. So he picked the acting, he picked how true it was to the novel, and not every movie is based on a novel. So that might not even be a criteria if you chose to do a movie review. But the acting, the special effects, think about other things that, make a movie good. The costume, the makeup, the setting, the directing, things like that, right? So you want to make sure if you choose to go this route that you have very specific criteria in mind to evaluate this movie you've chosen, but none of it is about the story itself. You don't want to tell your reader what the movie is about, right? You want them to go see it so they can, watch it and figure it out for themselves. But you want to give them very specific things that might appeal to them. Of course, you want to go see the movie because you want to know what the storyline is. But you have to go do that on your own. I'm going to tell you about all these other elements of the movie that make it so great. And now maybe you'll be even more likely to go watch it. So keep that in mind. Movie reviews can be really troublesome if you don't heed that advice and use this as an example to guide you. Nowhere does he discuss the plot necessarily. So we're going to look at another movie review in the next video. That one is a student sample, and I might repeat some of this stuff, but I think it's worth repeating because I've seen too many students run into problems when they try to do movie reviews. So I want to give you examples so you'll see how to do it the right way, because I don't want to tell you not to do a movie review. But just know that it's not a book report, right? It's not a plot summary. But if you have any questions about Harry Potter and the Sorcerer's Stone essay, not the movie, feel free to let me know. Otherwise, you can go ahead and move on to the next video.